staffs. Today we'll dive into figuring out which is the best of the cursed staffs. In the current meta, almost every one of them has its place in Albion, except for one, which we'll talk about later. Today there'll be a lot of theory and examples. I've broken it all down into timestamps, enjoy the watch. Let's start with the general Q, W skills and passives. First Q, Wild Curse. Applies one Wild Curse charge which deal periodic damage, up to 4 charges. A great Q for PvP in corrupted dungeons, mist and hellgates. The main damage comes from the periodic damage of curse charges. On its own, this Q doesn't deal much damage. Second Q, Cursed Cycle. Launches a cycle that damages all enemies hit and returns to its starting position, applying a curse charge to them. In the current meta, it's not the best Q for cursed staffs. It has a long cooldown and it's tough to land. Personally, I guess it's useless Q for current meta. Third Q, Cursed Tar. Creates a 3-meter radius pool of cursed tar, slowing all enemies inside by 10%. Enemies in the pool gain a curse charge every second. This is the ideal Q for PvE. It also used on some staffs in ZVZ and small-scale fights. Let's move on to W abilities. First W, Armor Piercer. Fires a 22-meter beam, dealing damage and reducing resistance for all enemies hit. This W can be used in PvP for kiting. On a one-handed staff, you can also pair it with your E to deal even more damage. More on that a bit later. Second W, Desecrate. Roots all enemies within a 4-meter radius and applies one curse charge to them. In PvP, use it against mobile opponents to catch up with them. Third W, Grudge. Enhances the auto attack of selected ally, usually yourself. The skill stacks up to 4 times, with more stacks increasing damage. You hit max stacks super fast. By the 3rd stack you can start auto attacking and the 4th max stack will build during the animation. Use Grudge against opponents you need to fight face to face, like daggers or swords. Fourth W, Cursed Beam. A targeted ability that deals damage. If the target has a curse charge, it creates a 4-meter radius pulse that deals area damage, consuming 1 curse charge every 2 pulses. This W dishes out massive area damage, which perfect for PvE. Fifth W, Dark Matter. A bouncing orb that jumps from one enemy to another, dealing minor damage with a long cooldown. It's the most useless skill in Albion. Let's move on to passives. First passive, every 4th auto attack deals damage in a 5-meter radius around the selected target. It deals very little damage in both PvP and PvE. I don't recommend using it. Second passive restores a small amount of mana. Pick this if you're running out of mana. Third passive, every 5th spell increases all your damage by 10% for 4 seconds. This is the most popular passive. It has a non-obvious mechanic. For example, take Grudge. If you activate Grudge while this passive buff is active, Grudge will deal 10% more damage for its full 10-second duration even if the passive buff expires. But if you activate Grudge first and then get the passive buff, Grudge won't get the 10% damage bonus from the passive. Fourth passive, every 6th spell increases your movement speed by 20% for 3 seconds. Useful against mobile opponents in PvP. Let's break down the first one. One-handed Cursed Staff. The ability Deathgivers. Throws a skull at an enemy that explodes after 5 seconds, dealing damage based on the number of wild curse charges. The ability damage cannot be reflected. Great for corrupted dungeons, mists, open world and 2v2 hellgates. This stuff is super easy to play. Packs a ton of damage, but it's not very mobile. Against experienced opponents who know how to counter it, you'll have a tough time. For skills, use the first Q, first W and third passive. Against kiting builds, you can swap to the second W. Here's the classic build. Muizak slightly boosts magical and physical damage. Hunter Hood Retaliate gives a bit of resistance and reflects 85% of incoming damage back to the enemy. The best time to pop it is during the enemy's peak damage, like the E from Dual Swords, Frost or similar. Keep in mind, some E's can be reflected, like those from Wildfire Staff, Cursed Skull and so on. Also watch out for builds where the damage peak comes from Q abilities, like Fire with Shoulder Robe and Morgana Cape. Cleric Robe Everlasting Spirit. If you take damage within a 1.5 seconds after activating it, you gain 3 seconds of invulnerability and 20% boost to damage and outgoing healing. Use it at the start of a fight during the enemy's damage peak or right before your own E cast to amp up its damage by 20%. Soldier Boots. Situationally use Rejuvenating Sprint or Wanderlust. Rejuvenating Sprint is your standard 5-second sprint with a 30 seconds cooldown. Wanderlust lasts 15 seconds total, gradually increasing movement speed from 10% to 80% each second. Use Rejuvenating Sprint as your main sprint, and save Wanderlust for cases where the enemy can't kite or purge you. For example, Chill Hal with Assassin Jacket will freeze you for 1 second, back off and wait out your Wanderlusting in invisibility for 7 seconds. Also Finn's Scowl and Helmet of Valor can just purge you sprint buff. Martlock Cape. When your health drops below 25%, your defense increases by 15% for 5 seconds. This cape adds even more survivability to the build. For consumables, take Beef Stew, Health Potion against kiting builds or Giant Potion against face-to-face brawlers like Dual Swords, Gloves and so on. Fight Breakdown against Newbie on Dual Swords. Right off the bat I throw a beam to win the HP trade. He missed his E and I use Retaliate predicting his W, but he doesn't use it. I hit Sprint to chase him down. Now we just stack Qs. Here's he used Sprint against me, so I back off and keep stacking Qs on him. I didn't use my E at 2 stacks because he drank a Giant Potion. I waited for the potion to wear off, then dropped my E with a Cleric Robe buff for more damage. Also I cut his resistance with a beam and chugged a Giant Potion for his funeral. Now about the downside of the one-handed Cursed Staff. I ran into an Arcane Staff who used the dodge skill on their boots, it given about a second of invulnerability, perfect for dodging the Cursed Staff's E. On top of that, the Arcane's E purges all buff, so basically I'm left without my E, Hunter Hood or Cleric Robe against him. I throw my E right away to put it on cooldown and he used his dodge, probably hoping my E wouldn't come off cooldown before his dodge. I also decided to go with Grudge, thinking I could one brawl with him. That was a mistake, though I think kiting with the first W would have been better. He put my Retaliate and I dropped my E at 4 stacks almost immediately. It felt like his dodge came off cooldown perfectly second for second. If I used my E just a tad earlier, I think he would have exploded. Cursed Skull. E ability Hunting Scream. Summons ghosts in a 6-meter radius that move in the targeted direction, dealing unreflectable damage. Enemies also take an additional fixed 1.2% of their max health as true damage. Great for small groups in Avalonian roads, camps in open world and so on. It's also strong in corrupted dungeons and can be used in mists, but in the current meta it's not super popular there. The main challenge is landing this stuff's E, but if you master it you can dominate in corrupted dungeons. For skills use first Q, first, second or third W, plus the third passive. First W for kiting, second W to prevent being kited, third W for face-to-face brawls. Build for solo PvP. Finn's Scowl Purge. Removes all buffs from the enemy. Since the Cursed Skull lacks mobility, use Purge to strip their sprint. Against melee like Dual Swords or enemies with Mercenary Jacket, prioritize purging the jacket's buff. Hunter Hood is super popular in 1v1 PvP, but don't bother purging it since the Cursed Skull's E can't be reflected. Mercenary Jacket. Bloodlust. Restores health when you deal direct damage for 6 seconds up to 7 times. In short, this jacket gives you lifesteal, pop it when you're low on HP. Sometimes against mobile opponents you can't heal off them. In those cases use the jacket and D on mobs. In corrupted dungeons you can heal off the crystal. This trick also works against enemies with Finn's Scowl who purge your jacket's effect. Just back off to mobs, pop the jacket and use your E. Royal Boots. Rejuvenating Sprint as the main skill. In corrupted dungeons situationally use Royal March. The skill description is wordy, but basically after a short wind up it's a longer and faster sprint. Use Royal March in 2 cases. First when you can't catch an enemy, Second, when you want to avoid fight and break crystals. Martlock Cape. Even experienced players forget about this cape effect in face-to-face fights. In tough brawls where both you and your enemy are low on HP, they luckily overlook the cape, which give you 15% extra resistance for 5 seconds when your health drops below 25%. Honestly, even I sometimes forget I'm wearing a Martlock Cape. For consumables, Rusted Pyramid Snapper, Health Potion and Giant Potion. Playing against a spear with Health Potion. I'm going for an aggressive playstyle, so I pick Grudge and slot a Giant Potion. He used to retaliate, and the key here is not to hit into it with Grudge, but to stack Skews instead. I just took 170 HP damage for no reason. Next, we both activate Mercenary Jackets. Under my Mercenary Jacket I throw my E, and with my Fiend Cowl I push his jacket. Since I'm up against a melee, I try to stay in the area of my E. Using the Giant Potion and boost here wasn't ideal, because he instantly resets his jacket with Spectre Hood. I should have held the Giant Potion and sprint until he pops his jacket again, but it didn't mess things up too much. His at first stacks, we're roughly even on HP, and he's used his E, so he got nothing to kill me with right now. Then he fully resets the fight. My Giant Potion's cooldown is longer than his Health Potion, so I'm not starting a fight until mine's ready. I slowly come closer to start the fight. I land a terrible E dealing 0 damage, and then out of nowhere he swapped from sprint to a giant on his boots. The skill's effect is almost identical to a potion. I only noticed this when reviewing the replay. I thought he swapped it to a Giant Potion. If I'd known, I would use first W and kited him, since he can't catch me without sprint. On top of that, he swapped his jacket for Inferno Shield. That was his biggest mistake, I think, since my E can be reflected. My Martlock Cape procs, and thanks to the cape alone, I survive on low HP. After that, I try to keep my distance so he doesn't kill me with his E. And as soon as my sprint comes off cooldown, I chase him, but he decided to run into mobs and just dies. Lifecurse Staff. The ability in Feeble Blades. For nearly 4 seconds you cast spinning blades in a 6 meter radius, dealing damage and purging all buffs from enemies hit. The E's cooldown depends on the mastery and tier of the Lifecurse Staff. Great for corrupted dungeons, mist, small scale and ZVZ. The E has super long cooldown and low damage, but its main strength is the 15 meters cast range and the ability to purge buffs. Skills are the same as for the Cursed Skull. First Q, first, second or third W, and the third passive. First build for solo PvP. Taproot boosts your max HP. Guardian Helmet grants a shield that absorbs damage and removes all periodic damage effects. If your health is below 40%, the shield's strength increases. It's simple, use the shield when you're taking damage or to clear periodic damage. This helmet pairs great with the Brazilian Cape, which activates when you use an active helmet skill. It grants a shield and immunity to purging buffs. Guardian Helmet and Brazilian Cape practically makes you immortal for 4 seconds. If you're up against an enemy with a Fiend's Cowl, use the helmet first, then sprint. In that way they can't purge your sprint buff. Cultist Rope Levitation restores 7.5% of your max health and 5% of your max mana, while increasing your resistance for 4.5 seconds. The skill can be interrupted by knockbacks, but if you use a Giant Potion before the rope, it can't be interrupted by forced movement or knockbacks. Since the rope heals a percentage of your max HP, the Giant Potion won't reduce the healing received, unlike, say, using a Giant Potion and then a Mercenary Jacket. Royal Boots are used the same way as with the Cursed Skull. For consumables, Rusted Pyramid Snapper, Health Potion and Giant Potion. Second build for Mists. Muizak boosts magical and physical damage. Cultist Cowl, Soul Rend. Curses a selected enemy for 4 seconds. The cursed player takes damage whenever they use a skill or auto attack. If the target is a monster, it takes magical damage throughout the effect's duration. Mercenary Jacket and Plate Boots, and also the Martlock Cape. Consumables for both builds are the same as for the Cursed Skull: Rusted Pyramid Snapper, Health Potion and Giant Potion. Grailseeker. It's got tons of crowd control and mobility. I don't yet know my opponent's game plan, whether he will kite me, try to catch me with traps or go face to face. So for now I play cautiously. I pick Grudge thinking he might outtrade me face to face. After all, staffs have a lot of damage from Q and W skills, but I didn't consider that his plate armor gives no damage bonus. I hear he's sprinting for a burst, so I drink cleansing potion. Honestly, it did nothing. Only worth using if he catch me with their sun or roots on traps. I can't chase him since my sprint on cooldown, and I've got no real way to catch up. He got tons of mobility from Q and W skills, while I'm stuck with just my sprint, which is on cooldown. I reset the fight and start over. He try another burst, and I use Guardian Helmet with Brazilian Cape. He got nothing to break through that. While chasing, I make sure not to step into traps to avoid gating out with roots or a stun. I also avoid following him into mobs, since his mobility lets him easily avoid mobs, and I take unnecessary damage, so I play super carefully and avoid mistakes. The K is not to play by his rules, but to force my own. I clear mobs cautiously and stick to cleared areas. Finally, it clicks to swap my W to roots, since he can't break through my defense, and Grudge isn't doing much when he just run away and reset every fight. I slot roots to make chasing easier. As soon as he sprint, I stop him with roots and try to cast my uninterruptible E, but he interrupted, probably due to ping. Chasing again, I use sprint, he had 4 wild curse charges and I am just a split second short of refreshing them with roots. Not a big deal, but then I run into a lava trap, and he could control me with roots. In a panic, I hit Cultist Rock. Confessed why he didn't root me, I keep chasing and use my E just to drag out the combat, hoping he hit more traps that slow and reduce max HP. My sprint almost up, and it feels like his death is near. But no, he got lucky finding a red that knockbacks, plus more slowing traps ahead. I don't get why the mobs barely damage him, but whatever. I root him under 3 dagger mobs, but even that's not enough to break through. He escaped again. I don't follow into mobs, though maybe I should, since he's super low on HP and I've got sprint and all my save buttons ready. But I play it safely, aiming for the win. I go back to a cleared spot and wait. By the way, he swapped Q and W skills that deal more damage. Still, he can't outtrade me. I've got too many saves. I use Guardian Helmet with Brazilian Cape, stacks Qs in parallel. He missed a beam that could have interrupted my Cultist Rock. I drink a giant potion, back off and stack Wild Curse. Once the silence ends, I hit Cultist Rock, though it's overkill since I'd have beaten him anyway. I miss my W on purpose to give him a fair shot. A mob slows him and he misses his roots. That's it for him. We finish the poor guy off and loot an easy 600k and 21k in Fame. Gloves. He got tons of damage and can interrupt my Cultist Rope with Q, W or E skills. He didn't slot proper sprint on his boots, so I pick my beam and plan to kite. He don't close the gap in time and already take damage from my W. I planned to keep distance and throw my W, but because of the map at the bottom of the screen I didn't see I got too close, and he jumped to me with assassin boots. No big deal, I've got plenty of saves. I completely purge his cleric rope and he activates assassin hood during my E, but cancel it. He tried to burst me again. I know his W is still in cooldown since he used it early and didn't reset it with Assassin Hood. I use a giant potion and Cultist Rope to prevent him interrupting my rope with a knockback from his Q. And that's it. He out of HP and step into a trap. Demonic Staff. E ability Anguished Soul. Realizes a soul that damages all enemies hit and applies fear. The more Wild Curse charges, the longer the fear effect lasts. Great for 2v2 Hellgates and honestly not much else. Some folks use it in mists and corrupted dungeons, but I think that's a pretty shaky choice. The E deals low fixed damage. This is a two-handed staff with no mobility, which makes it poor fit for mists at the very least. You might make it work in corrupted dungeons, but I guess not in the mist. 4 skills, first Q, third W, third passive. Against one-shot builds, swap to the second W to chase them down. Build for Hellgates. Fiend's Cowl, Purge. Mage Robe, Purge Shield. The Fiend Cowl removes buffs from the selected target, while the Mage Robe grants damage resistance and purges all buffs from enemies who hit you. If you're up against an opponent with nothing to purge, like a Cursed Staff or daggers with the first Q, swap the robe to Frost Shield, which gives damage resistance and reflects 15% of incoming damage. Cultist Sandals. Leaves a trail that debuffs enemies, reducing their damage resistance and incoming healing. Deathford Cape for extra damage. For consumables, Beef Stew, Poison Potion against healer and DPS, Cleansing Potion against one-shot builds, and Resistant Potion against 2 DPS. Claymore and Healer. Right away we stack Lifecurse on both. I pop Grudge and the K is to purge the Claymore's heroic charges with either my Fiend's Cowl or Mage Robe when he hit 2 or 3 stacks. Without heroic charges, the Claymore's E does barely any damage, plus I've got 2 purges, so it's tough for him to hit 3 charges for a full damage E. I had a good moment here, I almost killed the Claymore, landed a solid poison potion, but he drank a resistance potion and survived. On the second go I'd probably finish him, but my mana running low. For the next few minutes we've just mindlessly running 8 circles, spamming skills until my mana regenerates and the Claymore decided to die by straying too far from healer. The healers got low mobility and couldn't catch up. I use an E at the Claymore's back, knocking him even farther away. A couple of auto attacks, a Q and the Claymore's done. Finishing the healer is just a matter of time. With demonic stuff against a healer there's an interesting strategy. Try to split the DPS and healer as far apart as possible, so the healer can't reach to heal. Throw your E at the DPS and your healer should rush their healer, pushing them away with Robe of Purity. It's tough to pull off, though, so it doesn't always work. One-shot builds, Staff of Balance and Blazing Staff. Against them I slot Roots on my W to zone and chase them. I move to better terrain for the fight and wait for them to engage. Against one-shot builds, mistakes are deadly. One slip up can cost you the build. I see their names pop up below and prep for the fight. This Staff of Balance starts approaching, so I chunk his HP and zone slightly. The Blazing Staff has artillery on his W, which we can only interrupt with my E. While my E's on cooldown, I play cautiously, keeping distance. There's a high chance that if they land a perfect burst on me, my healer might not keep up. This Staff of Balance comes at us again, and I stop him with Roots and stack Lifecurse. He finally pops Sprint and stun me, but I use Cleansing Potion right away. This Staff of Balance lands a terrible burst, and the Blazing Staff drops a phenomenal E. Now I focus the Blazing Staff since they're out of buttons. He used artillery and I interrupted with my E. The fight outcome is clear now. They're out of buttons, the Blazing Staff is done, and the Staff of Balance can't do much solo. Against the Staff of Balance, resistance potions are better since they only have 1 stun on W. If they'd played their buttons properly, the Cleansing Potion would have been useless, and they might have killed us if the Blazing Staff had landed their buttons and the Staff of Balance played better. Deathgivers and Healer. The Deathgivers are running the second Q, so I keep Mage Robe with Purge Shield. The plan's the same as with the Claymore, purge his stacks. Deathgivers are dangerous opponent. With the demonic stuff you don't always need to use your E for damage. Sometimes it's just to zone DPS away from you or your healer. He using Mage Robe on the Deathgivers, which can purge my Grudge. So I pop Grudge early to put it on cooldown. He activates his Mage Robe, but not right away, which works in my favor. I get couple of hits it under Grudge. I pop my Robe to purge his stacks. I land an E on both, but it doesn't do much. I could ask my healer to rush and push healer away with Robe of Purity, while I fear the Deathgiver in the opposite direction. Either way, we forced a giant potion out of the Deathgivers, so they're out of saves. On the second burst they should die. While my main buttons are cooldown, I stack Lifecurse on both the healer and DPS, hitting my main target with Grudge to burst them down with my E. At one point I see both the healer and DPS are low on HP, so I play into both. I land another E on both, this time successfully, interrupting the healer's Q. He disoriented now, unsure how to heal. The healer's Martel Cape runs out. They pop Cleric Robe, then Guardian Boots and drink a giant potion, but it's too late. The Deathgivers are left alone, pop their boots and try to run away. I purge his boots with Fiend's Scowl and finish him off. Honestly, we faced a pretty weak healer and DPS. At the very least, the Deathgiver didn't slot a Q to counter Mage Rob, and the healer used the giant potion with Martel Cape. They just ran out of mana and had nothing left to heal with. We were on a solid win streak, going half an hour without loss. But then this happened. We queue into another Hellgate, used double charge, but it get purged our bubbles. And we spawn right under one-shot builds with just farmed. I swapped my buttons in time, but my healer unfortunately picked the wrong queue. We have to take the fight as is. I try to don the Staff of Balance and chase the Blazing Staff, stacking Wildcurse charges on them. I'm prepping for their boosts. I swap out my dumb cleansing potion. The Blazing Staff consistently misses his E. If I had resistant potion, I'd probably have survived and finished the Blazing Staff. He had literally 2 bars of health left, and my E was ready to flip the fight completely. But I had the cleansing potion. That's not the main issue, though we spawned right into one-shot builds in a low spot, losing the advantage from the start. It's frustrating and we could play better, but we didn't expect this. Sandbox Interactive, my respect. Rottcaller Staff. E ability Plaguebringer. Slightly knockback enemies, deals damage and prevents affected targets from receiving healing for 2 seconds. Afterward, they gain 6 seconds of immunity to further healing prevention. This staff is great for group PvP and depth. It sometimes shows up in new Hellgates, but it still feels not good enough here. This staff is unique because of its E, which prevents healing. In group PvP, that's absolutely crucial. Skills for group PvP: 3rd Q, 1st W, 3rd passive. Skills for depths: in all cases I use the 3rd passive. For PvP, 3rd Q, 4th W. Against a healer and DPS, 1st Q and 3rd W. Against 2 DPS or one-shot builds, 1st Q, 2nd W. If the DPS aren't mobile, you can play with the 3rd W. Build for depth. Muizak slightly boost damage. Stalker Hood. Use cleans against one-shot builds. Otherwise, Mortal Agony for more damage. Phasescale Rope. Its unique skill includes 3 spells. First skill for kiting, second skill if the opponent has burst damage like Hellspawn Staff, third skill for more damage against healer and DPS. Cultist Sandals. Against one-shot builds or 2 DPS use Blue Sprint, against a healer and DPS use a Rotting Ground. Deathfur Cape for extra damage. For consumables, Beef Stew and Poison Potion. Build for PvP and PvE in Avalonian Roads. Mist Color for cooldown reduction. Guardian Helmet for more safety. Phasescale Rope. Use the first spell for kite. For PvE, bring a Royal Jacket in your backpack for easier and faster mob farming. Stalker Shoes for mobility, plus they slightly boost your damage. Martlock Cape for survivability. For consumables, Resistance Potion and Deadwater Eel Stew. Damnation Staff. The ability Cataclysm. Deals damage in a 13-meter radius and reduces damage resistance for all enemies hit. Only suited for ZVZ. The E takes a long time to cast, but has an absolutely massive radius. Skills: 3rd Q, 1st W, 3rd passive. Build variation for ZVZ. Phasescale HUD Hyperfocus. Grants immunity to spell interruptions. When activated, this skill ensures your E can't be interrupted. Judicator Armor. Creates a force shield where up to 10 allies gain damage resistance and 30% bonus to healing. Boots of Valor. Premonition. Increases movement speed by 45% for 3 seconds. If you get hit by crowd control during those 3 seconds, you gain an additional 120% movement speed bonus and immunity to crowd control effects for 4 seconds. Morgana Kick activates when you use your E ability, increasing cast speed by 15%. For consumables, omelets and giant potions. ShadowCaller E ability Inner Shadow. A targeted E ability. If used on a target wearing cloth armor, it simply deals damage. On leather armor targets, you deal a small amount of damage and giant lifesteal from the E. On plate armor targets, enemies within a 5-meter radius have their damage resistance reduced and take instant damage. In PvE, always throw the E at the tank. Great for PvE statics, Avalonian dungeons and tons of other PvE content. Skills: 3rd Q, 4th W, 3rd passive. Build for PvE. Stalker Hood or Druid Cowl. Stalker Hood increases your damage by 15% for 4 seconds. If enemies within a 6-meter radius have health below 15%, their damage resistance is significantly reduced. Druid Cowl creates a 5-meter mana circle, restoring mana for up to 5 allies. Royal Jacket, Royal Robe, Druid Robe or Spectre Jacket. Royal Jacket speeds up skill cooldowns for up to 10 allies within a 5-meter radius. Royal Robe boosts damage and reduces cast time for up to 10 allies. Druid Robe increases your damage by 6% per spell cast, stacks up to 6 times. Spectre Jacket ignites the ground beneath you, dealing damage in a 6-meter radius while losing 2% of your maximum health every 0.5 seconds. Spectre Jacket is mainly used in Hardcore Expedition and Avalonian dungeons. Druid Robe, Royal Robe and Royal Jacket are better for statics and other group PvE. If someone in your team has a Royal Robe, take Royal Jacket, and vice versa. If both are already in group, go for Druid Robe. Cultist Sandals provide mobility and slightly boosts damage. Demon Cape for more damage. Mist Color for ability cooldown reduction, or Crypt Candle which gives more damage but lowers your defense. Use Mist Color with Royal Jacket for faster cooldowns. Pair Crypt Candle with Spectre Jacket for max damage output. For consumables, Omelet with Mist Color and Royal Jacket. Beef Stew with Crypt Candle and Ropes for damage. Calming Potion for safety. Great Cursed Staff. E ability Area of Decay. This E is basically an improved 3rd Q with a long cooldown and a 3-second cast time. It also removes periodic healing effect from enemies, but that doesn't really fix its issues. If you use the Q and keep auto-attacking, you deal more damage than if you use the E and auto-attack after the Wild Curse charge run out. Where to even use this stuff? No clue. In PvE, the 3rd Q does everything this E can do. In PvP, it's super easy to dodge this E. It doesn't even deal direct damage. It just stacks Wild Curse charges a bit faster and removes periodic healing effects. Compare that to, say, the Lifecurse Staff, which purges all buffs, including periodic healing, and its E actually deals damage. What the point of this stuff? No idea. Way back it saw some use in 2v2 Hellgates, but where it fits now is anyone's guess. Out of the Cursed Staff 3, my personal favorite is the Lifecurse Staff, thanks to its sweet E that purges buffs in AoE. If someone rushing you, you just purge his boots and run. If you're chasing someone, you purge his boots and catch up. You can also strip meta items like Mercenary Jacket, Stalker Jacket and so on. For me, Lifecurse Staff takes 1st place. 2nd place goes to Cursed Skull. It's solid in PvP, but not really my thing. Its E is pretty tough to land since it's hard to hit and easy to dodge, depending on the build you're up against. If it's something like Frost or both, they'll just jump out with their W and your E goes to waste. 3rd place is the ShadowCaller. It's a blast to play in PvE content, super easy to pick up, you press 5 buttons and then chill. Next up are Demonic Staff, Damnation Staff and Rottcaller Staff. These stuffs are only good for specific content. They're not great for solo play, so they're really niche and not for everyone. The one-handed Cursed Staff. I see it as a fun weapon. Sure, watching someone pop from its E is instantly satisfying, but it's super easy to counter and kite, making it tough to play against experienced opponents. Hands down, it's second to last. And dead last is the Great Cursed Staff. I think the staff is straight up unplayable and needs a rework. The E is awful, it's a two-handed weapon and there is no content where its periodic heal and removal shines. In the current meta, where to even use it, no clue. That's all, thanks for watching.